Please be seated.
Yes, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just before the break, General Pandurević, we left you at Trebinje. During what period of time were you stationed at Trebinje?
Na području Trebinja
I was stationed in the Trebinje area from the beginning of October up until mid-November 1991, to the best of my recollection.
And were you there involved in any combat activity?
jedinice
The unit was sent there to engage in combat, but this was a period of certain truces that were more or less respected. So there was no serious fighting, in fact.
And where did you go after Trebinje?
Upon returning from Trebinje, the unit was disbanded, and I spent about 7 days on leave. Then a mobilization of other units was carried out, and I was designated as battalion commander, or rather the chief of staff of a light infantry brigade that consisted of companies that had been formed anew within the framework of the Užice Corps.
And how long did you hold the position of chief of staff within that unit?
pa na moju
Well, luckily or unluckily, for 5 or 6 days.
And after that?
pošto je
After the brigade consisted of companies, there were about 6 companies in the brigade, 6 infantry companies. I was designated as the commander of the 1st infantry company because according to the plan for the company, that company was supposed to engage along a separate axis.
And where did you go with that company?
sredinom
In mid-December 1991, I was sent to the area of Western Slavonia, to the north of the Sava River, to the Pokučani area.
And how long did you remain there?
tamo sam ostao
I remained there until around the beginning of March 1992.
Now, where were you between March 1992 and June of 1992? And what rank and position were you filling?
po povratku iz zapada
Upon returning from Western Slavonia, the very same battalion was mobilized again, the one that I had been sent to the Herzegovina and Dubrovnik battlefield with, and as a commander of that battalion at the beginning of April, I was sent to the Visegrad area. At the time, I had the rank of Captain First Class.
And thank you. What was the demographic and military situation that you needed to deal with in the Visegrad area at that time?
ja moram
I have to admit that as far as political and demographic conditions are concerned, I was more familiar with them in Croatia and Slovenia than in Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, on the basis of the information that I obtained at the time, the situation in the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina was critical. The first armed clashes had already commenced in the Visegrad area. Armed conflict had already started, and most of the Serbian population had left the municipality, whereas the Muslim forces had taken over the hydroelectric center in Visegrad, and they threatened to flood Visegrad and all other towns downstream along the Drina River.
Was that the situation when you arrived there with your unit?
Ja kad sam
When I arrived from the direction of the place called Ruda, which is southeast of Visegrad, I arrived at the hydroelectric power plant. The Muslim forces were still present there. In the immediate vicinity of the hydroelectric power plant, there was a military warehouse that belonged to the JNA, and there were about 1,000 Muslim refugees, civilians, who were in that warehouse because they were afraid that the town would be flooded. I went to the hydroelectric plant with my forces. The Muslim forces left the plant and withdrew to Gorazde.
How did events develop in Visegrad while you were there?
pa za svega
Well, in just a few days, peace and order had been established in the municipality of Visegrad. The Muslim and Serbian population returned to the town, over 90% of that population. The Muslims and Serbs formed the government. The JNA was in fact the force that was supposed to prevent any further conflicts from breaking out in that area, and they managed to do that.
How long did you remain there?
pa to je bilo
Well, it was a time when negotiations were ongoing as to whether the JNA should remain in the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, or as to whether they should withdraw to Yugoslavia. Initially, it was said that for the following 4 years, the JNA would remain in the territory of Bosnia. However, suddenly, a decision was taken according to which the JNA should withdraw from Bosnia. So on the 18th of May, together with other elements from the brigade, I withdrew to Serbia.
Did you return to Visegrad?
da
Yes, I returned to Visegrad around mid-June or at the beginning of June. I can't exactly remember the date. I relieved myself of the duties of the commander of a battalion, and I arrived in Visegrad.
And had the situation altered by the time you returned there in June?
pa još u vreme dok se naša brigada
Well, while our brigade was preparing to withdraw from Visegrad, the population, both the Serbian and Muslim population, was somewhat unsettled. There was a kind of polarization, a separation of the population on the basis of their villages and settlements. So when I returned to Visegrad, I came across a wartime situation, and demarcation lines, or rather conflict lines, had already been established.
And what sort of units were involved in this wartime situation by the time you got back there?
pa u suštini bile su dve više
Well, on the whole, there were 2 Visegrad brigades. One was Serbian, the other was Muslim. In addition to them, there were some paramilitary formations that had arrived from Serbia, had been partially formed out of individuals from the local territory.
What paramilitary groups did you first encounter when you arrived back in Visegrad?
pa to su bile različite
Well, there were various groups there. Some called themselves the White Eagles, Others just called themselves volunteers. Some were from Priboj, that's the southeastern part of Serbia. Some were from Užice. Some called themselves Dejanovi, others White Eagles. So I don't really know the names of each of the groups.
And when did you first encounter any such unit?
Ja sam na tak
I came across such units while the JNA unit was still in the area. And after I had returned, I came across those units or such units in town. They were staying in some hotels. They were trying to live a life of luxury and to engage in warfare in a manner that was particular to them.
And how did you deal with it?
s obzirom da ja
Since at the beginning I didn't have any direct contact with them, the leadership of the municipality complained to me and said they had certain problems with such units. One morning, I came across a group of such soldiers in the vicinity of the restaurant where food for my soldiers would be prepared. There was a clash between myself and them because I didn't allow them to enter the restaurant to get food from that restaurant. It was a quite intense clash. Weapons were pointed, but we managed to calm the situation down, and they requested certain forms of transport so that it would be possible for them to leave Visegrad. I asked the president of the municipality to provide them with such transport, and they then left the area.
After you returned to Visegrad in June, how long did you remain there?
Pa ja sam na
Well, as commander of the Visegrad Brigade, I was there until the 27th of September 1992. While I acted as the commander of the British Visegrad Brigade, there was an oral order from the main staff ordering us to form a tactical group for Gornje Podrinje. It was to consist of 5 brigades. A brigade from Rogatica, the Visegrad Brigade, the Rudo Brigade, the Čajniče Brigade, and the Goražde Brigade.
I takva grupa
And such a group was actually formed.
What was your command structure at that time in June to December of 1992?
znači od
From June to the end of December, I was the commander of the Visegrad Brigade. At the same time, the chief of staff of the tactical group from the time of its formation, and after the commander of the Rude Brigade was killed. He was killed by Serbian soldiers. I took over the duty of the commander of the Visegrad tactical group. And from the 27th of September, my command post was in the town of Rudo. Sometime in November, an order was issued according to which the Goražde Brigade was to be reorganized. It was also part of the tactical group. But it was falling apart because the population had been expelled from the Goražde area, and I was ordered to form that brigade and to be the commander of the Goražde Brigade.
Did you have a corps command?
to je bila specifična.
The situation was particular. The Visegrad area was very isolated in geographical terms and in terms of command relationships. We just had a telephone link to the main staff and telephone links between the brigades up until November, until the time that the Drina Corps was established. That area was not organized very well in military terms. It was only when the Drina Corps was formed in November that all these units became part of it.
And what physically did your command amount to in Rudo?
Komanda je bila
The command was located in the cultural center, or the center of the 1st Proletarian Brigades, that was established in 1941, the 22nd of December. That was also the day of the JNA. In addition to myself, in the brigade command, there was a reserve major, an operations officer, there was a reserve lieutenant, there was a liaison officer, and there was a, or rather communications officer, and there was a typist, no one else, a woman who was a typist.
And how were you in contact with the brigade or brigades?
Ja sam sa brigadama
I established contact with the brigades by telephone, using reserve post office telephones, ordinary phones. I didn't have an encrypted teleprinter, so I could only establish contact through the Drina Corps once it had been established. I could only establish such contact through the Drina Corps after it had been established, but not before.
I just want you to analyse for us a document. Can we have 7D728 into E-Court, please? Now this document in English has the title Combat Order and appears to be a document signed by you. The 10th of November 1992, was that a date before or after the establishment of the Drina Corps?
ovo je dat
This date is subsequent to the establishment of the Drina Corps.
And can you help us as to what this order reflects in the history of events in Visegrad?
ovo naređenje se
This order concerns a warning to the units of tactical groups about the possible enemy activity at the time, planned for an exchange of the dead between the Visegrad Brigade and the Muslim Visegrad Brigade.
Thank you. And just very briefly, can we have a look at 7D742? And I'm told I have to make sure that the complete version is called into E-Court. It's a two-page document, General Pandurević. Please tell us if you want to digest both pages before I move to my questions.
Ja bih molio da se i kod
Could I see the other page, the second page, please?
Yes, we've only just started to deal with documents, General Pandurević. We're going to deal with a lot during the course of the next few days. We do have them all here in a hard copy, so if there's any document you wish to look at in hard copy, we will provide it to you.
Dobro, hvala.
Very well, thanks.
That's a document dated the 21st of November of 1992. What event or events does that reflect in Visegrad at that time?
Ovaj dokumenat nije
This document doesn't concern Visegrad, it concerns the Gorazde Brigade.
taktičke grupe,
As I, as commander of the tactical group, was mainly engaged in establishing or reorganizing the Gorazde Brigade. I had moved closer to Visegrad, to a place called Vardište, and the command post for this brigade had been was supposed to be located there because it had been completely broken up. All the population had withdrawn from the area of Gorazde and moved over to Serbia. It was necessary to bring those people back, to reorganize the brigade and to send it into action. This order shows that the corps commander decided to appoint me as commander of this brigade.
And how long were you engaged in that task?
pa ja sam
I was very serious about the task. I started establishing the brigade. I found buildings for their accommodation, buildings to keep equipment in, and after a month, an order was issued for me to report to Zvornik, although I had barely taken over the duties I've been talking about.
How did you first come to learn of your of the requirement that you should go to Zvornik?
pa jedan dan je na ovo komadno
Well, one day, Lieutenant Colonel Uljanin came to Vardište. He was the chief of security in the Drina Corps, and he relayed an order from the corps commander to me. I think it was Colonel Živanović at the time, an order according to which I was to report to Zvornik, and I was to be a brigade commander in Zvornik. I was completely taken aback by this, as well as other people in the command of the Gorazde Brigade. They had developed good relationships with me. We were on very good terms, and they expected me to remain there where I was.
Had you ever been to Zvornik before?
ja sam kroz Zvornik ranije prolazio.
I had passed through Zvornik before, on the way from Sokolac to Belgrade. However, I never stayed in Zvornik, and I wasn't very familiar with the situation in Zvornik, or I knew nothing about it.
So did you go to Zvornik?
Da, otišao.
Yes, I went to Zvornik. I was driven there by an escort. I arrived at the command post of the Zvornik Brigade at the time in December 1992. The post was located in Orahovac.
Did you formally resign your position in Visegrad?
Nažalost,
Unfortunately, this was contrary to all the military rules and regulations. I quite simply bid farewell to those people from the brigade and left. On the basis of the oral order, from the Drina Corps command. I didn't transfer my duties to anyone.
Who was the first person you met when you got to the command of the Zvornik Brigade in Rahavac?
Pa ja sam zajedno sa potpukovnikom.
Well, together with Lieutenant Colonel Puljanin, I entered the building where the command was located. I met Captain First Class Mio Dragutinović at the time. That's how he introduced himself. I had never seen him before. Lieutenant Colonel Ulyanin said, "This is your new brigade commander." Then he turned around and left.
Can we just have a quick look, please, at P417? It's point 60, which is page 18 in the English and page 21 in the BCS.
Can you repeat for the transcript the exhibit number, please?
I'm very sorry, P417.
Thank you.
Now, these are the provisional service regulations of the Army of Republika Srpska of August 1992. And point 60 describes the procedure for the handover of duties by a commanding officer. You've already told us what happened when you left your previous position. Did anything such as is described in point 60 happen when you arrived at Zvornik?
Tačno ova tačka
Bullet point 60 of the regulations speaks about the handover of duties from the level of the squad commander to the brigade commander. There's nothing of the sort as described in bullet point 60 happened when it comes to my arrival in Zvornik. Truth be told, there was a war going on and one could not expect that everything mentioned in the bullet point could be carried out or honored. In any case, a minimum should have been done. The brigade command should have been all in one place. The corps commander should have been present there. And also the person who had been acting as brigade commander should have been there, and there should have been a meeting, briefing and debriefing, and I should have been put abreast of the overall situation in the Zvornik brigade. However, none of this took place.
Probably my fault, General Pandurević, but the one thing I don't think you've told us yet is what the precise date was that you arrived in Zvornik.
Ja sam došao u Zvornik.
I arrived in Zvornik on the 18th of December 1992. I remember because the following day is St. Nicholas Day, the patron saint that I remember. And I also remember one more thing. When I heard initial information about the situation in the Zvornik brigade, I told to the driver who brought me from Visegrad not to leave, to stay put just for a little while longer, because I might be inclined to join him on his journey back.
Who was the acting commander of the Zvornik Brigade on the 18th of December 1992?
Iskreno da vam kažem,
At that moment, I wasn't clear, to be honest. The former brigade commander who had been appointed on an order was Dragan Petković. He was seriously wounded in October, and he was undergoing treatment at the military medical academy in Belgrade. My impression was that the duties of the brigade commander were discharged by Dragan Obrenović. However, there was a lieutenant colonel there, Bosančić, who, according to some information that I received from the command, acted on behalf of the commander, and it was his own decision to say to Obrenović, you are now going to be carrying out the duties. There was no paper to show clearly who was in command of the Zvornik Brigade at the time.
Did you meet Dragan Obrenović on the day of your arrival?
Da, negde predveče.
Yes, sometime late in the afternoon, Dragan Obrenović returned to the command of the brigade from the field. I introduced myself to him. We met. I'd never seen him before. I didn't even know that that man existed. In very brief outlines, he briefed me about the situation in the brigade, and as of that moment on, pursuant to an oral order of the Corps Commander, I de facto assumed the command of the Zvornik Brigade.
Now, I just want very briefly to look at some combat reports from that particular period of time. And can we start, please, by in E-Court having 7D 731. This is the regular report of the 18th of December of 1992. It appears to have been signed by Dragan Obrenović. Do you recall whether you were shown a report for the day or offered the opportunity to sign a combat report on the day you arrived there?
As far as I can understand this document, this is a report which was drafted pursuant to an order of the Drina Corps Command and sent to the Drina Corps Command as well. And it speaks of the current deployment of the units of the Zvornik Brigade. I did not see the document at the time, and I didn't sign it either. I was not even aware of its existence at the time.
Can we come on to 7D 740? This is the regular combat report for the following day, the day after you arrived in Zvornik, the 19th of December.
Da, ovo je redovni borbeni.
Yes, this is a regular combat report dated 19 December. I was in the command, and that was the first day. Or if you take that I was there on the 18th as well, then it would have been the second day of my command of the Zvornik Brigade. I can see that the person who was supposed to sign it was Chief of Staff Captain Dragan Obrenović. It may be that the duty officer didn't know that I was there, or maybe he did it by sheer automatism. He just continued putting Dragan Obrenović's name in lieu of the signature.
Thank you. And lastly, in this succession of documents, 7741. I think the document in Serbia needs to be moved up just a little bit. Thank you. This is the regular combat report for the 20th of December. And was that the first report signed by you as commander of the Zvornik Brigade?
S obzirom da je
In light of the fact that during that period of time, there were two combat reports drafted during the day, one around 12 noon and the other in the course of the afternoon around 1700 or 1800 hours. One of them was signed by me. And that's the report that you see in front of you. Whether I signed the first one as well, I don't know. It may well be the case or maybe not. In any case, this was done on the 20th of December, the day when I actually started signing my combat reports.
Thank you. Now, I just wonder whether we can take a moment to recap at this stage. On the 18th of December 1992, how old were you?
pa u junu 92. godine
In June 1992, I was 33, which means that I was 33 and a half years old in December.
And what rank did you hold within the army?
kapetan prve.
Captain first class.
You've told us you previously commanded a brigade. For how long had you done that?
For around 6 months.
And apart from the 5 or 6 days you told us about, had you ever been a chief of staff?
No, not really, no.
And had you ever attended command staff school?
Komando štab
I started attending command staff school. I spent there 20 days, never completed it. This is the school without which you would not qualify for the rank of colonel, and you could not be a brigade commander. However, after I completed my master's degree, my establishment specialty was altered so that subsequently I no longer needed the completed school as a requirement. Although I was sent again in September 1993 to the school, however, this referral was not approved by the command of the Drina Corps because of the war operations, and I never went back to that school. Whereas the rest of my generation that also dropped out of the school at the same time as I did continued that education after the year 1993.
So that we complete the full picture, what experience had you had by that stage as the commander of a battalion?
moje iskustvo
My experience was rather modest. both as a battalion commander in peacetime. I did not have any, to be honest, because all I had as a battalion commander was spent in wartime. I had some experience, but only 6 months, which was not enough for me to assume the duties of a brigade commander and act as an experienced officer in that position.
According to the rules of the JNA, what rank and experience ought you to have had to command a brigade?
The procedure in the JNA required for somebody to become brigade commander to have been battalion commander for at least 2 or 3 years, and then the operations officer in the brigade, but not necessarily, but the chief of staff in the brigade, and he should have had the rank of lieutenant colonel or colonel and should have been about 45 years of age.
Mr. Haynes, I recall seeing a document about maybe 5 minutes ago or so, in which there was a description of how the recommendation that your client be appointed as a brigade commander was being endorsed, but it was not approved, or no approval had yet been forthcoming. What I would like to know is how come the recommendation itself was endorsed if your client is now explaining to us that the criteria would have been somewhat different, and whether he has knowledge that the decision to approve his appointment as brigade commander was withheld at the time because of what he's just described to us now, namely that certain requirements had to be met. I don't know if I have made myself clear. I don't recall...
I know the document, and I know to what it refers, and I'm absolutely confident General Pandurević will as well, and will give you the explanation you want.
I think if I haven't been clear enough, then we can perhaps...
I'm sure you have.
Okay, thank you.
General Pandurević, you heard the President's inquiry. Can you deal with that, please?
Your Honor, there is a document. I don't know whether it is on the list or not. And in this document, Lieutenant Colonel Popović, who at the time was a member of the Command of the Drina Corps, sent a proposal to the commander of the Drina Corps for me to be the commander of the Gorezhde Brigade. Immediately after that, an order was issued by General Mladić about my appointment to that position. That document also exists. I don't know whether it is in a court, whether it can be seen now or not. However, that was the procedure, and that's how things went.
So in terms of the document that suggests that there was a period of time when authority was withheld, was that for a very long period of time or not?
I don't know exactly what time period you're referring to. However, at that time, the appointments were not accompanied by adequate documents and orders. People would first be referred to certain duties and positions, and written documents would follow that. In order for somebody to be appointed as the brigade commander, the person in charge of that appointment was the Minister of Defense, nobody else. and only the corps commander of the main staff could move for that position or propose that person for that position and appoint them temporarily. There were periods of interruptions in the formal drafting of such documents.
Well, if we need to return to that, we can do, but I hope that deals with your inquiry. If it doesn't,
More or less, let's
Yeah.
move ahead. Let's
Okay.
move ahead. My question was more related to whether, in spite of requirements and regulations, in reality, appointments as to brigade commanders were being made when there was reason to believe that the requirements were in there. Yes, I see Ms. Favor standing.
Monsieur le Président, je crois qu'il y a une erreur.
Your Honor, I think that there's a mistake, and not a very significant one, but before I let my colleague continue, on page 45, line 18, and 19 and 20 of the transcript, one reads, Lieutenant General Colonel Pandurević
Of the Drina Corps sent a proposal to the commander of the Drina Corps. Je crois qu'il y avait une erreur de traduction.
I think that there was a mistake in the translation, so if the witness can please confirm the position of Colonel Pandurević, please.
Thank you. Good point, Ms. Favor.
Vjerovatno je greška u
It must be a transcript issue. There may be a mistake.
What did you actually say? You understand English from what we saw from another document. So page 45, lines 18, 19, and 20, 21. What would you correct there?
Was Lieutenant Colonel Pandurević the commander of the Drina Corps?
ne potpuno
Lieutenant Colonel Pandurević was the assistant for morale in the Drina Corps, and the corps commander at the time was Colonel Živanović, as far as I know.
I think we're all happy.
Yes, and while we are at this, on line 23 on the same page, was it General Panic or General Mladic?
o generalu Mladiću.
I was talking about General Mladic, Your Honor.
That's why I'm raising it, because I heard you say General Mladic, but we have Panic here. Okay, let's continue, Mr. Haynes.
Thank you. I'd like you just to briefly look, if you would, at the manual for the work of command and staff, point 27. That's P699 in E-Court, page 20 in the English, and pages 21 and 22 in BCS. And in particular the aspect of that point which says it is necessary for the officers in commands and staffs to have previous experience in exercising control in those activities and units whose interests they represent in performing their particular function in the command. We'll come on to the numbers of professional officers in the Zvornik Brigade in due course, but you had an opportunity to assess the experience of your officers in command and staff. What sort of previous experience had they had?
U svakom slučaju,
In any case, they did not have the experience envisaged by bullet point 27 of this instruction for the work of commands and staffs. And particularly in combat campaigns, one requires a lot of experience and knowledge. The officers who were members of the Zvornik Brigade Command were mostly reserve officers who had previously been members of the staffs of territorial defense at much lower positions than the ones that they were appointed to in the Zvornik Brigade. And I'm also including here Dragan Obrenović as the Chief of Staff and myself as the Brigade Commander. I feel the need to explain to the trial chamber, and especially the president of the trial chamber, with regard to the previous question and answer. It is true that there were criteria that somebody had to meet in order to be appointed to a certain position. What happened in the war was that one commander of the Zvornik Brigade was Lieutenant Colonel, another one as well, and the third one was also Lieutenant Colonel. They offered several colonels to assume the duty. However, they were experienced enough to know what this meant, and finally it was I who was put in that position, and not even suspecting what lies ahead of me. I assumed the position without meeting the necessary requirements for the post.
Now, moving on from there, you've told us that the previous commander of the Zvornik Brigade was a man called Dragan Petković. Is that right?
da,
Yes.
And at the time you arrived in Zvornik, you were aware that he had been injured in 1992, in October of 1992.
da.
Yes.
Following on from what you've just said, were you familiar with what rank he held?
Znao sam da je bio
I knew that he was a major.
Now, I'd like us, please, to look at a document we first put into eCourt, your service record. That's P372. And we need to look at page 4 in the English, page 8 in the BCS, please. And very briefly, General Pandurević, what is that? What does that page in your service record record?
What I see in front of me on the screen is an order issued by the Minister of Defense of Republika Srpska on the appointment of Vinko Pandurević as the commander of the 1st Zvornik Light Infantry Brigade. The date is 8 October 1993.
Thank you. And can we go to another page in that document? That's page 8 in the English and page 16 in the BCS. And what does that page of your service record indicate?
Ovo je dokument
This document originator is in reference to the previous document. This is a report on the takeover of duty. Pursuant to the order of the Minister of Defense, I was appointed as the commander of the Zvornik Brigade, and I assumed the duty officially on the 26th of October 1993. This was done formally. Everything was done on that day, although it says here that I reported to the unit on the 13th of December. This is not correct because I reported to the unit on the 18th of December 1992.
General Pandurević, between the 18th of December of 1992 and the 26th of October 1993, did you regard yourself as being in command of the Zvornik Brigade?
Da, je.
Yes, I did. I was in command of the Zvornik Brigade.
So what was the effect of an order formally appointing you?
Ovo naređenje
This order regulated my status in the service. As of this order onwards, I started receiving salary. My files were updated based on this document.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, what was the state of the brigade when you arrived there in December of 1992?
Ja ću pokušati
I'll try and be very brief when describing the situation as it was. Based on the reports that I received on the 18th and the briefing that I received on the 18th when I arrived in Zvornik, it was said to this trial chamber previously that on the 6th or 7th November, a lot of civilians and soldiers were killed in the territory of Brjansko Brdo, and that one battalion of the Zvornik Brigade was completely dissolved, and that battalion withdrew to the outskirts of the town of Zvornik. Another battalion was in the territory of Drinjača, south of Zvornik, some 12 kilometers further away, and it was completely encircled. The territory between Crni Vrh and Memići, which is northwest of the city of Zvornik, was not covered by the Serb forces, which means that that territory was completely empty. The other battalions were in very dire straits. The command of these battalions were all next to impossible. When I heard all that, I wanted to return to Visegrad. I did not want to assume the duty of the commander of the Zvornik Brigade. However, as a person who sincerely and militarily understood any order, I took the job and I embarked on a very difficult mission.
Did you know how many soldiers there were in the brigade?
Pa ja sam
Well, first I asked about the strength. No one was able to provide me with an exact figure. They said between 5,600 up until 6,000 odd. It's necessary to make a distinction between the number of people in the brigade and the number of soldiers. When I say that, what I have in mind is how many of those people are prepared to carry out combat tasks as soldiers. The brigade was organized, as far as I can remember, into about 11 infantry battalions. Their strength was more than the strength of the battalions in July, or the strength was different with respect to the battalions in July. So I wouldn't want to mention any figures in order to avoid creating confusion.
You've told us that at the time you arrived, the command of the brigade was in Arafat. In strategic terms, where was that in relation to combat?
Well, the brigade command was practically at the first front line. That's contrary to tactical rules. However, the corps command took such a decision because they knew that this territory was under threat, and if they placed the brigade command there, then some of the units that secured the command of the brigade would be in the area, present in the area, and would thus be able to provide a minimum form of protection there.
Thank you. I just want us to look at a few contemporaneous reports to get a flavour of the situation. And we'll look, please, at 7D946, a regular combat report for the 19th of December. And we need to look at page 6 in the BCS, please. When you've had the chance to refresh your memory of the document, I wonder if you could let us know, insofar as you already haven't, what state of affairs that is describing.
Here we have the partial description of the overall situation in the territory of the Zvornik Brigade in December 1992. We can see that all the Serbian villages weren't protected, or they were poorly protected. Enemy forces succeeded in entering the village of Gruice. They succeeded in looting and killing some old women, and the Serbian forces were not very strong and put up minimum resistance.
Thank you. And can we go to P280, please? This is an order about a month after you arrived in January of 1993. Does this reflect the combat situation in the state of the brigade then?
Ja bih molio da
Could we scroll up a bit, please?
Certainly.
ovaj dokument je
This document was drafted on the basis of the way events developed in the area at the time, and on the basis of the intelligence and information that we had. And this information concerns the purposes of the enemy. I issued an order to units of the Zvornik Brigade saying that they should defend all inhabited places and the town of Zvornik at all costs.
I think you might like to look at the second page and paragraph 2 in particular, and give us some comments on how that reflects the capabilities and alertness of the troops at your disposal.
u ovoj tački 2
Item 2 mentions how the Zvornik Brigade units should act, how they had been acting, and it states that they had acted in an inadequate and inefficient manner.
Thank you. Can we now move on another month to 7D 470, please? 470. And perhaps you can tell us what event this described.
This is a regular combat report dated the 18th of February 1993. It's similar to standard combat reports. Item 1 mentions enemy activity, and it's mortar fire on the Kiselyak inhabited area. The second part mentions the exhumation of soldiers who were killed in Bodjansko Brdo, and it mentions Kamenitsa. The date was the 6th of November 1992.
Thank you. And following on from the reference to Glazhansko Brdo, can we have a look, please, at 7D 1007? And in particular, paragraph 2 here.
This item is about the exhumation and identification and burial of a certain number of soldiers who were killed in Kamenitsa. The figure is mentioned 35 and 2 were unidentified. Rather, the figure of 22 soldiers relates to identified soldiers. I apologize. I remember that funeral. I attended it.
During your association with the Zvornik Brigade, was there ever a larger massacre of your men than the events at Glazhansko Brdo?
Well, what we have been discussing is, in fact, the massacre at Bodjansko Brdo. As far as I can remember, we've already seen photographs that are photographs of the event, and on the 7th of January 1993, there was a massacre in the village of Kravica. I, with some of the forces from the Zvornik Brigade, was involved in preventing the Muslim forces from advancing any further.
I was simply interested in the number of members of the brigade that were lost at Glazhansko Brdo. You've read a document now showing there were 35. Was there ever any single incident of combat where you lost more than 35 men?
This is the number of men found, according to some information, from the time there were other men who were listed as missing. There were other men from the Shekovici Brigade, but this is the largest number of soldiers killed in one day from the Zvornik Brigade. That was the case for the entire wartime period.
Thank you. Now, in seeking to improve standards in the brigade, did the main staff of the Army of Republika Srpska embark upon a survey of the brigades in 1993?
Glavni štab je
The main staff, from the time it was established, was in a very difficult situation when it comes to controlling or establishing control over the territory of Republika Srpska, and when it comes to organizing the army. Since the main staff didn't have many professional officers, it wasn't very numerous, it had a very difficult task. However, the main staff did send special teams of officers into the field. They visited the brigades, the corps, and examined their combat readiness, or tried to assess their combat readiness. They also visited the Zvornik Brigade.
And did you ever see an assessment of the Zvornik Brigade by the main staff at about that time?
Da, jesam vidio.
Yes, I did see an assessment of its combat readiness. It was the main staff that made such an assessment, I think, in March 1990.
In general terms, what was that assessment?
Pa ta ocena
Well, the assessment of combat readiness is carried out in a standard manner. And there were positive and negative experiences, but there were more negative experiences and decisions. The general assessment was that the Zvornik Brigade was cumbersome, that the command wasn't in a position to successfully command such a brigade. It would be necessary to divide the brigade into two parts, and I think its assessment was not as good as the assessment given to the Bratunac and Šekovići brigades.
The document's still, unfortunately, in translation, so we may need your help a little bit, General Pandurević, but the document is 7D 1001. I wonder if you could, a good deal less quickly than you have been speaking so far, just read, as it were, the contents of that cover sheet for us.
glavni štab
The main staff of the VRS, strictly confidential number, the 5th of March 1993. Assessment of combat readiness in the units of the Drina Corps, being forwarded to the command of the Drina Corps. We hereby attach to this document an assessment of combat readiness in some of your units. Examine this assessment, draw up a plan to deal with any shortcomings, and include these objectives in your working plans. General Ratko Mladić.
And can we now go to page 5, please? We can see there the Zvornik Brigade has a number. Is that the score it achieved?
Zvornička brigada
The Zvornik Brigade was given the score 3.20 in brackets fair.
And going down to paragraph B at the bottom of that page, I wonder if you could read for us the conclusions there, please.
Slabost
Weaknesses and shortcomings. The brigade is composed of 10 infantry battalions. If we add support units and other elements to this, then it is quite clear that its composition is too cumbersome, and even a far stronger command would not be able to ensure adequate command and control. Documentations at the level of the battalion command isn't provided by daily command and control. The firing system at the level of the battalion hasn't been professionally organized. The firing possibilities, firing equipment possibilities haven't been made adequate use of. There's a noticeable lack of professional and qualified officers at all levels of command.
Going back to the score, did any brigade score lower than the Zvornik Brigade in this assessment of combat readiness?
Ja mislim da se ovom dokumentu
I think that this document also mentions the Bratunac and 1st Birčani, or rather Šekovići brigades, as far as I can remember. Their assessments were more favorable than the assessment of the Zvornik Brigade. If we could have a look at the entire document, I would then be able to state something with certainty.
Well, that may mean that this is an appropriate moment to take a break.
Exactly. I was just going to suggest that. 25 minutes from now, please. Thank you.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.